Good afternoon. I'm Lauralyn McDaniel, the Medical Industry Manager for SME, and SME, together with our founding partner sponsor, Materialise, would like to welcome you to today's program. We're very excited about this ongoing initiative, and this is our official face-to-face kickoff of the program, and so we hope that you'll find many valuable ideas and supportive of the goals that we're trying to reach. So this is our program. This is the URL for the ongoing initiative. So as mentioned, we will have follow-on webinars and things of that nature after today. I'd also like to thank all of our initiative supporters, including Johnson & Johnson, 3D Systems, and many of the others who are here today to participate in the program. I'd also like to thank the advisors who have spent many months discussing and trying to find the best way to engage all of you in a productive discussion to get us to common guidelines, common methodologies to move the technologies and the applications forward. And this is a list, and I'll destroy names if I say all of them. So if I could ask all of the advisors who are here to just stand for a few moments so we could give you a round of applause, please. Thank you. And before I go on to, I also want, SME has taken this on with Materialise under the umbrella of our Medical Additive Manufacturing 3D Printing Group, which is a group of volunteers, industry made up of clinicians and device manufacturers and others, all looking to help themselves and help each other address some of the challenges. These are some of the projects that they're working on at the moment, and if you're interested in learning more, there's the URL, and you'll also receive that after the event. I'd like to turn the program over to Lieutenant James Coburn from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration.
Thanks, Lauralyn. So I was asked to give a little introduction or summary of what the FDA might consider evidence, and initially I thought this was going to be a very short presentation because the answer is, of course, it depends. However, I have no conflicts other than working for the FDA. However, we can break that down into a few other distinct points that I think might be useful for the discussion to come. Level of evidence, in addition to just what evidence we have, but the level of evidence we need, as far as the FDA is concerned, can be broken down by the type of submission that is being submitted to the FDA. There are Class 2 devices with 510K submissions where the barrier or the burden of proof is substantial equivalence to a predicate device. So we're talking about things like comparative studies, clarification of device features and differences in technology. If you're doing an IDE or a clinical study, you're looking at the safety primarily, and then initial indications of effectiveness in clinical process. And so that is really dependent on your trial design, your endpoints, how have you picked your patient population, how have you described what your endpoints are and how you meet those. For PMAs or Class 3 devices, we're the full safety and effectiveness, so all of the testing to show that your device is safe and is effective in this new indication or this new type of technology. If you're doing a combination product, you may have to go through the investigational new drug or a new drug application, and those are very different pathways, but I would refer to the Center for Biologics and the Center for Drugs if you're actually interested in pursuing either of those routes. One of the major aspects that crosses the submission types is the indications for use. So the level of evidence you have is going to be based on where and when and how your device is being used, and of course, what kind of benefit is expected and what kind of risk is expected of that, from that device. You can get at those from risk analysis tables, from FMEA or failure mode effects analysis. Phew, almost lost that one. And then one fairly new aspect that we are looking at is patient preference, and that's a fairly large initiative at the FDA right now to incorporate what the patient thinks about the benefit of the device. Is there a quality of life improvement? How much risk will the patient accept? The typical example for that is for an oncological product or a cancer drug, they have fairly harsh side effects and fairly harsh risks associated with them. However, if you are a terminal cancer patient, you have a different assessment of that risk and that side effect than you would if you weren't. One aspect, of course, of building evidence is the kind of measurements that we have to make and the metrics that we use. Preclinical tests are often very specific. They test the bending modes, they test wear, shear, things like that, and they're usually very specific to a feature of a plate, of say a tibial tray, something like that. And they don't always adapt as well to delineating performance that are new features or new types of new mechanical aspects of a device or new designs for a device. So creating types of measurement, creating metrics, creating standards and tests that allow us to test new features is a way to build evidence that these are valid clinical tools and have a clinical benefit. Of course, with these new structures that we make through additive manufacturing, non-destructive evaluation comes into play increasingly now. In addition to preclinical testing, obviously, clinical trial design is going to be an important factor. As I mentioned before, your patient populations, especially with patient-specific devices, now determining what's your patient population, how do you classify each device as a same device? You can't have all of the medium-sized devices and all of the large sizes device, or all of the hips and all of the knees, or something like that. You might have to parse your patient population, change your scope, look at the kinds of groups and metrics that your endpoints are describing to get a defined outcome that we can look at for this, again, specific feature of the new type of device. So it's a different way of looking at the clinical trial, other kinds of study designs, Bayesian design, adaptive clinical trials, things like that. And those are all within the FDA's purview, and we have guidances on how to try and make those types of trials. Other types of effects that aren't as primary are things like, are you doing additional procedures? Are you lengthening the time between when the patient comes in to when they can have the procedure? So how many CTs, how much radiation, how long do they have to wait? Those are secondary effects, but yet can lead to additional clinical evidence and benefit. More long-term or robustly, looking at the entire process, the entire product life cycle as far as post-market monitoring, evaluations, failures, revisions, how do you consider the benefits to these patient-specific models? Those will all play into generating this clinical evidence. And so I think from a larger perspective, the entire process and the entire product life cycle has to be considered. And within that, we get to things like sampling and looking at your validation and how do you define all of those fairly routine quality systems metrics for regular types of manufacturing, but for patient-specific and for essentially creating your material on the fly in the additive manufacturing world. How do you define that as a lot, as a batch, and how does that affect your device safety and your device effectiveness? So that's a total product life cycle aspect, but not necessarily a clinical aspect. So the landscape, as we all know, is changing. There's a shift in design, in thought process. There are new needs. There are old needs that haven't been met that are being met by this new technology. And obviously there's a lot of opportunity here, but there's not a lot of experience in doing this kind of work. So with typical manufacturing, with typical design, we have decades, even hundreds of years of experience, depending on what we're talking about. And so, as you all know, which is why you're here, building evidence is key to making this move forward and continue to be a valuable process for the clinical world. So I would just say that the FDA has processes to help this. So we like the pre-submission meetings, as always, and we hope to be a part of building clinical metrics and clinical evidence for all processes, and as this is a new emerging one, we want to help foster the innovation that's capable here. With that, I'd like to introduce the Materialise Initiative's founding partner sponsor and CEO of Materialise, Fried Vancraen.
Welcome to all of you. I must say I have already given quite some presentations, but I'm rarely been as nervous as I am today, because this is not going to be 2 days of presentations. This is a workshop where we will work together and where we also from Materialise side don't have the ideal outcome, where this is an adventure as much for us as for anybody participating here. And I hope you will all find value in the experience, but we cannot guarantee it. It's an experiment. Now, why take the risk? Why do this experiment? Why is it so important, in our opinion, that we start getting more serious about evidence? At this moment, I think there is a global expectation that additive manufactured devices are going to bring a lot to the medical community. And some of you will be familiar with the concept of the Gartner hype cycle. Well, in December of last year, we were exactly at the top of this hype cycle. And the axis there is the axis of inflated expectations. So worldwide, people are going to expect a lot in the industry, as patients, as clinicians, as hospitals, from 3D printing. And we have been working in this for 25 years, and as we are extremely big believers in this technology, we are also at the same time afraid at this moment, truly afraid, in order to meet those expectations, because we know that and I think many people in the room share our knowledge that 3D printing is bringing a lot of good things to a lot of patients, but we actually have a big challenge to prove it. And that challenge is what we will try to discuss over the next 2 days, and try to find at least some common threads so that together we can be stronger, and together we can make this market for the companies among us, this opportunity to treat patients better for the surgeons among us, this opportunity to provide more cost-effective care for the hospitals among us, that we don't fall too deep in what is called the trough of disillusionment. Because at this moment of inflated expectations, we will fall a bit, but let's not make it an abyss, but just a little temporization of what can be expected from 3D printing. This is why we want to do this, and I think everybody in the room can benefit from this if we succeed in working together and in trying to create some methodologies, or to agree on existing methodologies that we should use them as much as possible to deliver more evidence for our sector. When preparing for this, we found that there are 3 different angles where we need to look at in order to come with a convincing story for applications of 3D printing that they are truly worthwhile. The first is the engineering angle, and I would relate that a lot to the risk analysis and what just has been said by the side from the FDA. Yeah? What they want to prevent is that harmful medical devices are entering the market, and that things can go wrong even if fundamentally they are good. If just 10% of them are harmful, they are still very harmful for society. Yeah? And that's what the engineering side of the evidence needs to cover. But that is not enough to make 3D printing cross that trough of disillusionment. We need to make sure that clinically those devices make a difference, that they are better than alternatives, and by being better than alternatives, they are widely adopted by clinicians all over the world. If we are doing just exactly the same in clinical outcome as traditional technologies, maybe some people will adopt it just for the sake of doing something new and attractive from, this is a new thing, but we also know that it's not going to last long, because after this new thing, another new thing will come, and it will be replaced. So we must provide evidence that, the clinical outcome is truly better than with the alternative methods. And that's, again, much easier said than done, especially because one of the big benefits and one of the niches where 3D printing can really excel is in the treatment of relatively rare diseases. Diseases with few people or few patients that couldn't be helped much before, but thanks to the flexibility and the individualization that 3D printing allows, now can get help much better. But as the sample sizes are there so small, what about statistical relevance? What about the classic methods? It's not working anymore. So on one hand, that's a big challenge, but one of the easiest ways to solve this is, again, collaboration. If we can find ways to collaborate and bring many of those small groups together, we are getting again to relevant levels. And then the third component, if all healthcare systems around the world are facing the fact that they are too expensive. So new technologies that are much more expensive, even if they are clinically better, even if they are safe, they probably don't live long either. So another element that we have to realize, but also have to prove that we are realizing, is the economic side of it. That we can either prove that the values in qualities of life years, for instance, exceed the costs, or that even you have overall in the process a cost reduction. And that's not easy either, because 3D printing technologies are not necessarily cheaper, rather the opposite. They are in general more expensive than mass manufacturing technologies of the past. So these are three very important viewpoints, and the workshop has been built up that for the three different groups of devices we are going to consider, we will each time have introductory presentations where people will look at that group from one of those three perspectives. And during our work together, we will have to take care that we find solutions for the three components. As it is a question of working together, it's also a question of combining academic research, clinical research, and the research in the medical device companies. And that is another of those challenges that we are facing. We see a lot of clinical studies done, but those clinical studies are often hardly usable for economists. They can't derive truly costs and benefits from the clinical outcomes. And there we should have a better collaboration so that we don't face all our own domain. The clinicians just looking at the clinical outcome without having a feeling for the fact that the economics play also a role. The companies, of course, not having just a look at the cost effects, but also at what it can bring to the entire system and how they can sell the value rather than the price or the cost. And the universities looking at the scientific methods that help us to realize all of those studies in a way that is consistent and that is methodologically correct. Because we see also a lot of articles appearing where the methodologies are not necessarily very sound. So the rest of the workshop is up to us, and I don't mean US, but us all together. It's far from evident, so that's why I'm really nervous. Are we going to be able to create some relevant output that is not too theoretical, but that can be applied in practice by a lot of us? Are we going to find common ground that enable us to do follow-up on this, that it's not just a nice event where we had some nice meals and where we had some interesting, intellectually interesting conversations, but will we find ways to keep collaborating and to make sure that this collaboration results in real things? And yeah, will we be able to surmount short-term benefits that we maybe are pursuing on the hype, but will we be able to go for the real long-term opportunities that this technology is offering for so many patients? So thank you very much for being here. I know it's an effort from many of you. It's also a financial effort from some of the sponsors apart from Materialise. But we really hope that with this group we can start making a difference in working together for generating this evidence. So thank you very much.